Good morning, chemistry kiddos. Today what we're going to do is collect some data for a lab. Now, since you can't be here to do this in person, we're going to collect the data for you. Now, with the data, what you'll be able to do is to answer the following questions. And our goal today, this morning for this video, is to fill out this data sheet, which we'll talk about in a second. And then you have some questions back here. We've converted that into a Google Doc so you can follow along and at home. So you see the procedure is pretty straightforward, and we are, in the end, just making a salt. We're using two reactions. We are using 2 molar hydrochloric acid, as well as sodium hydrogen carbonate. And I'll show you all of that here in a second. You can see our steps are pretty straightforward. It's pretty small. As far as your pre-lab, you're going to get most of that information from the background that you see here. All right, so let's go through this procedure and see what we get. First thing you're going to do is put on your safety goggles. You can put on your imaginary ones at home. I have mine on, I assure you. And then number 2, obtain a 100 milliliter beaker and be sure that it's clean and dry. From this point on, we're going to use tongs. So I've got my tongs here. We do that so this is a lab where the mass is very sensitive, and we try to be as exact as we can. So it's a good way to make sure anything on our hands is not getting on the glassware. So let's move down to step 3. Find the mass of a dry beaker and record it on the report sheet. All right, so at this point, I'm going to put my data chart here, data sheet. And you'll see the first thing we're looking for is mass of beaker. So I'm going to move you over here. And we're going to mass a beaker. Maybe I'll turn it this way. There you go. Okay, so it's zeroed out. We'll gently place the beaker on there. And you'll see we end up at 65.86. So I'm going to move you back over here so you can follow along and fill this in. And you're going to have to be patient. I'm a lefty, so I'm going to be covering part of this up for a second. So 65.86 is the mass of my beaker. So I'm going to put 65.86 grams. Okay, pretty easy. And then you'll see our next step, step number 4, is to place about 1.5 to 2 grams of sodium hydrogen carbonate in the beaker. And then we're going to find the mass of that and record it as well. So I'm going to move you back over here. You see our mass is still 65.86. So if we were to add 2 grams, that'd put us at 67.86. So we're going to get in between, our instructions say 1.5 to 2 grams. So as long as I don't go over 67.86, we'll be okay. Okay. I want to get at least 1.5 in there though. So that's about 1.5. We'll put that for good measure. Okay, 67.46 is the combination of my beaker with the sodium hydrogen carbonate. So I'm going to put that in my next step, or my next data entry will be here. Mass of beaker plus sodium hydrogen carbonate was 67.46 grams. All right. So now, here comes some of the fun. We're going to place about 10 to 15 milliliters of 2 molar hydrochloric acid into our 100 milliliter beaker. We're going to slowly add it. A couple of things to take note of here is we want to do this very slowly. You'll see the reaction here in a second. We want to, not force any of the reactants out of the beaker, so we need to do this very slowly. And then 2, we also want to make sure that we don't add more acid than is necessary. So we're going to do this one a little bit slower. In fact, I think I'll go ahead and do it here. That'd be pretty easy for you to see overhead. Okay, so we have our 1.5-ish grams of sodium hydrogen carbonate. And I have about 10 milliliters of hydrochloric acid, 2 molar. And as soon as I start pouring that in, And notice the pool bubble. All right, and again, I'm trying to do this slowly as to make sure that we don't have too much in there, because what we're going to do is then get rid of some of this water. I've already given you some insight to our product here, and the less we have in there, the easier or faster it is to get to that point. Okay, so I'm going to keep doing that, and our instructions say to keep doing this, continue adding acid until the bubbling stops. All right, so you'll see it slows down and stops, but it's not completely reacted, and that's why I keep adding a little bit, a couple more milliliters at a time. Also trying to ensure that everything is in there, not bubbling out. Because if I was to pour this all in there very quickly, and you can still see some of that at the bottom there in that carbonate. If I was to pour this all in there very quickly, it would react faster, but some of it would pour out. All right, that's pretty neat. Well, okay, we are almost there. And you'll see there's still a little bit of sodium in there, hydrogen carbonate, but not much. So I'm going to swish this around a little bit, try to get it all reacting, still keep everything in there. And then what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to heat it. I'll also show you how I set this up, but then I'm going to pause it because it's going to take a little while to get rid of all the water out of here. I just want to make sure all the bubbling, I've reacted everything. So almost. Almost reacted everything. Okay, you'll still see a little bit down there. So I'm going to take this and just kind of give it a little bit of a stir, make sure it's reacting. Okay, there we go. You can tell it looks pretty good now. So I'm going to get my tongs and add my hydrochloric acid and my sodium hydrogen carbonate. And now I'm going. Okay, so this is what it will look like after you've evaporated all of the water out of it. And it has cooled if you're following along at home with the instructions. So we're going to take our tong and get our mass of our product here. And it looks like it's going to be about 67.02. So on your third line for your data entry, we're going to put the mass of beaker plus dry solid. And it says step 8, and that's the step that we're on currently. So 67.02 grams. You should notice that it is higher than where we started, but less than when we had just the solid in there by itself, sodium hydrogen carbonate. And we don't need to repeat that because, as you could tell, there is no water in there. In fact, I may have let it go a little too long. You can see it kind of splattered up on the side. So something to consider when we think about errors in this. All right, so at this point we have completed all of our data entry. See if you're following along again, step 8 we just completed, and step 9 is just a cleanup step. So at this point you have all the data you need for your lab.